Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program is about to begin. At this time, please turn off all electronic devices. Please refrain from using flash photography during the program. Thank you.
Good evening. For those of you that I have not met, my name is Joanne Drake, and I serve as the Chief Administrative Officer for the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. In honor of our men and women in uniform who defend our freedom around the world, and this evening we're going to add firefighters and first responders because of what's going on, and also because we have a special firefighter in the audience that we're going to learn a little bit about in a few minutes. So I ask that you stand and join me in the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now, before we meet our special guest this evening, I want to acknowledge another very special guest in our audience, Sean Newman, who is Janice Dean's husband. And if Janice is willing, I'm hoping we'll hear a little more about Sean and how the two of them met later in the program. Now, when you get your copy of Mostly Sunny later this evening in our museum store, or many of you may have already picked them up and you have them in your hands, you're going to see that the author's bio on the book jacket simply says, Janice Dean is the senior meteorologist at Fox News and serves as the morning meteorologist on Fox and Friends. She lives in New York City. Well, I can tell you, she's much more than that, much, much more. And this evening, we're going to learn just a little bit of what much more entails. Janice Dean is from Canada. I know quite a few people who think of Canada as our 51st state. But I do think that having Canadian roots provides you with a grounding of sorts and a unique sense of get up and go. Different somehow than those who were born and raised in the other 50 states. Perhaps it's really just the desire to get up and go from the cold of Canada and find some sunshine further south. Janice is also now a New York Times best-selling author of Mostly Sunny, which is what we will talk about this evening. But she has also written a series of children's books entitled Freddie the Frogcaster, which I understand may even lead to a television contract for Freddie. Throughout the years, Janice has tried out a number of career options. She's worked in a clothing store. She's been in City Hall taking phone calls for dog licenses, building permits, barking dogs, and nosy neighbors with noise complaints. Then she actually became one of the uniformed officers who enforced those laws, writing the tickets for parking meters and jaywalkers and barking dogs and presumably noisy neighbors. This was followed by a stint as an Ottawa traffic reporter, then a community events reporter at a rock and roll station, and a radio talk show in Ottawa, and then with MSNBC and Don Imus in New York. With a resume filled with both radio and television experience and a lot of life experience, she finally landed at Fox News in 2004, where she's reported on some of the biggest weather stories in history, including Hurricanes Katrina and Sandy. All of that is what kept her traveling and busy in front of and behind a camera or microphone. But I think she would tell you that her greatest successes are probably not the ones that are shown on her resume. And that would be her role as a wife and mother of 2 sons. There isn't a chapter in her book that doesn't blatantly or subliminally touch on the importance of her family, those that are sharing this journey called life with her. Throughout the book, which I read cover to cover and stickered quite a bit for things I wanted to remember, you will learn how Janice believes it's the hard times that we go through that shape our personalities, how we view our lives, and how we treat others. Appropriately, Janice has entitled her book, Mostly Sunny. But I think you will all agree, once you've had a chance to read it, that while she comes across with a sunny outlook every day on Fox and Friends, she's also had some rainy days in her life, and even wrestled with a number of pretty serious personal storms. And she's been brutally honest about those bad weather days in the pages of this book. In 2005, Janice was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and we will talk with her about that this evening. But let me just say that just by watching her and talking with her, you can tell she does not let MS define her. In the book, she talks about being body shamed growing up and bullied even now. The business of television is very harsh, and appearances are important. But in the book, Janice says, beauty truly does come from within. An ugly personality is toxic to even the most beautiful visages. It's clear that she's always looking at the within in others while trying to live her own life in the same way. We will also explore with her time in the broadcasting business with people like Don Imus and Roger Ailes, two men who enjoyed both success and scandal. Throughout the book, you can see that Janice Dean's sunshine comes from family, good doctors and nurses, close friends, good colleagues, and even many of you who are her fans. I do think she will leave you wondering tonight where your sunshine comes from. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Janice Dean to the stage.
Oh my goodness. It's the best intro I've ever had.
I wish there were more people, but I do want to thank all of you for braving the weather. It's sort of ironic that we're having such weather and Janice is here this evening. But we probably would have had 3 or 4 times as many. That's how many signed up. So I'm grateful to all of you for coming out tonight. And thank you, Janice, for joining us here and bringing your roommate with you.
Yes, my husband, Sean. Well, this is, what a treat, though. I mean, and we had the tour of the Reagan Library. You've all seen it, right? Oh, it's just
She
incredible.
had a quick tour, though. I'm sorry you didn't have your sneakers on. That probably
That's
would have been
okay. We're
better.
going to come back because it's
Good.
There's magic in this
Bring
place.
the boys next time.
Yes.
They might like that airplane, too.
I think so.
So I just wanted to start, in preparing to speak with you today, I discovered a very odd fact online, that this day in 1901, a woman named Anna Taylor became the first woman to go over Niagara Falls in a barrel. Okay, honestly, I don't know why you would want to go over Niagara Falls in a barrel and do such a crazy thing, but it got me thinking that you must have days that feel like you've been over Niagara Falls in a barrel. You titled the book Mostly Sunny, and it was not lost on me that MS are the first letters of that title. Mm-hmm. You said in the book that the moral of your story is that the sun always comes out after the storm. Can you tell us a little bit about your health and how you're feeling and how you can keep up this crazy schedule?
Every day is a gift, I think. And every day that I get out of bed and I can put my 2 feet down and stand up is a great day. But I had to learn that the hard way. And you mentioned 2005 was when I was diagnosed with MS. And it was the busiest hurricane season we've ever had. We had Katrina, we had Rita, we had so many storm names that we had to go to the Greek alphabet. And I remember being so tired, especially after Katrina, because of the devastation that we were seeing, and to forecast a storm that was going to, we knew that it was going to probably kill many. But after that storm, I thought, I have to take some time off because I feel extraordinarily tired, and not just, I only got 4 hours of sleep tired, but I can't get out of bed tired. And I went back home to Canada with my then boyfriend, Sean, because we needed to take a break. And literally the next day after we arrived back home, I woke up and I felt like I couldn't get out of bed, and I had this weird numbness and tingling in my feet, parts of my thighs. And so went to a doctor, just a clinic, walk-in clinic back home. And I remember the doctor saying, well, you need to go back to the US. And this is another topic about Canadian healthcare, right? You need to go back to the US and go get an MRI, because we're not going to be able to give you one for quite a while. Because you could literally have anything from a slip disc to multiple sclerosis. And I remember looking at her going, why is she telling me I could have that disease that I just associate with a wheelchair? But I took her advice, and I went back home and got the MRIs done, and I was almost a textbook study of MS. I was in my mid-30s. I was 35, and I had lesions on my brain and my spine, and the doctor did a spinal tap, which is something that they also do to see if you have proteins in your spinal fluid that show a neurological condition. In this case, it was MS. So the doctor at the time said, you probably have this, but we have to wait for another flare-up to officially diagnose you.
Wow.
But I wasn't satisfied with that. He kind of sent me on my way with some steroids and said, come see me in 6 months and we'll do another round of MRIs and see how you're doing. And I was like, wait a minute, you just gave me this dire diagnosis and you're telling me to come back in 6 months.
Is it genetic?
Well, my father had rheumatoid arthritis, and that is in the same family. They still don't know how people get MS. It could be living in Canada where you don't get enough sun. They think the vitamin D deficiency has to do with it. It could, I don't have direct relatives that I know of that have MS, but certainly my father had, an illness within the family of neurological conditions. So I was lucky enough that I went to several other doctors to get confirmation of the diagnosis. And I found a doctor that was compassionate and seemed to care about my health and put me on medicine right away, which I believe has helped me up until this point of remaining relatively healthy. Because I think if you go undiagnosed and you don't get therapy or medication, then you can go downhill
And I
quicker.
imagine a lot of people do go undiagnosed because of the symptoms are flu-like sometimes, or...
Well, people can go for many years with symptoms and not be properly diagnosed. For me, I talk about it in the book about being your own health advocate. And if you don't like your doctor, or you don't trust your doctor, or deep in your heart there's something wrong and you're not being looked at properly, then you have to go see someone else. I look at Selma Blair, the actress who was just recently diagnosed with MS, and I get angry because she did have symptoms for many, many years that either she ignored or she went to the wrong doctor or was not treated. And I think because she's gone downhill, so, over the years, I think it's because she wasn't properly diagnosed. Yeah.
So I'm not going to make this audience wait too much longer. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about how you met your roommate, and maybe a little bit about his own story.
Well, I have to tell you, Sean is not a TV he encourages me and loves that I love what I do, but he's not somebody that loves to be sort of the focus of attention. So I'll respect that, but also know that I feel like he was the rainbow in my story. I went through a lot of challenges and hard times and getting to where I am at a certain point, and then finding him, I believe the rest of my story began. I used to be very career focused. I think you have to be a kid from Ottawa, Canada, that gets to New York City and works with one of the biggest broadcasting names in radio and now at the Fox News Channel, you have to have a degree of, I'm going to conquer the world. But in doing so, I think I ignored the rest of it, like, finding a boyfriend, starting a family. And when I got to New York, I started with Mr. Imus and did not love that job. And if you read the book, you'll know why. And we can certainly talk about that. But when I landed in New York, what should have been my best job that used all of my abilities turned out to be really the worst job that I've ever had. And at that point, I was wondering why I had made all these decisions. Why did I move to New York? I don't like it here. I don't like the job. But a friend of mine back home in Canada was on her honeymoon in Hawaii, and she met a fella while she was there with her husband on a hike in Kauai. And that fella was Sean. And Leanne called me a week after she had gotten back from her honeymoon and said, "Are you coming back to Ottawa at any point?" I said, "Yes, I'm coming this weekend," because I was actually making the trip back and forth from New York to Ottawa because I didn't have any friends or family there. So we arranged to have dinner together. And before we got to talking about her honeymoon and the great time she had with Tony, she said, "I've met somebody." And I was like, no, let's talk about you. And she told me the story, how her and Tony were at the tail end of their honeymoon, and they went on this hike, and they met this firefighter from New York, and he was single, and that we should meet each other. And I was so overwhelmed with New York and not loving the job that I was in that I said, "Leanne, the last thing I'm thinking of right now is a relationship." And she said, "Well, it wouldn't hurt to meet somebody, to just be a friend of someone. And he's a firefighter." So part of the book, I actually have Sean write a little bit of the story about how he met Leanne and Tony, because you have to realize that all of these things had to come together for him and I to meet. Sean went there to surf, and the surf was too high, so he had to find something else to do, so he decided to go on this hike on his own, and that's where he met Leanne and Tony. At the end of the hike, they were parting ways, and Sean remembered he had his last T-shirt from his firehouse in New York that he wanted to give to Leanne and Tony. So he ran and tried to find them to give them the T-shirt, and that's when they asked if he would come to dinner with them. And that's where the phone numbers were exchanged. So all of these things had to happen for me to meet him. So we did meet. We had breakfast together. I was getting off my early morning shift, and he was getting off a 24-hour shift at the firehouse. And we had exchanged emails. We had never met each other. But I was going to drive into Manhattan on what bridge is that? The 59th Street Bridge. And he was going to meet me at, I forget the corner, but I picked him up in my Toyota Corolla. And he got in the car, and he's like, "Hi, I'm Sean." I said, "Hi, I'm Janice. Do you know how to park around here?" And we went for breakfast, and we both agreed that it wasn't love at first sight, but we had a great conversation. And I talked too much. That's what he remembers. But we saw each other again, and it blossomed into something romantic. And here we are today. So I always tell women who are trying to find their mates, their husband or boyfriends.
Call Leanne, and she'll take care of them.
Yes, world's greatest matchmaker. But also listen to your friends, because they know you best.
Did Sean know what Leanne was up to in Hawaii?
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, can you give them the follow-up real fast this summer?
Oh my gosh, we went back to the hike in Kauai with my two sons, Matthew and Theodore. You're right. Thank you.
That's not in the book. That's great.
Yes. well, I said in the book that one of our dreams to come true was to take our boys to the hike in Kauai so that our boys could see where, they became, really, and the love story began. So we went. Sean did the whole hike. We did about 10 minutes of it. But we made it, we took pictures, and my little guy Theodore was like, oh, this is so boring. This is hard work. Can we just go back and swim in the pool? But I know that when they get older, they'll appreciate it. We got some great pictures. Yeah.
Speaking of Matthew and Theodore, I know you love them, you're proud of them, and you're very protective of them because you're their mother.
Mm-hmm.
The story of you telling them about MS was really very special, and I was hoping you could share that with our audience. It must have been a very hard day for you.
Right. So I also believe that people come into our lives with a purpose, even if it's just somebody that you meet. Even our tour guide today, I felt like, there was a purpose. He gave us this greatest gift of seeing this beautiful library. So I had never told my kids that I had MS. They knew that I had to have medicine to be healthy. I did an injection for many years where actually Sean would help me do the injections, and they knew that Dad had to give Mom an injection so that she felt better. But I never really told them what I had until one day, my son Matthew, his third grade teacher, Mrs. Klein, we had heard about Mrs. Klein being in a wheelchair and that she had MS. And I was really glad that Matthew had her as a teacher. I heard she was an excellent teacher, people well respected in the school and the neighborhood we live in. But I never thought that because of her MS, I'd be able to talk about my MS. But one day, Matthew came home and said, Mom, you have a homework assignment. You have to write about me to my teacher, Mrs. Klein, and tell her some points about me and how you think of me and how I'm going to be in school. So I said, okay. And he said, oh, by the way, Theodore met Mrs. Klein today as well in the hallway. And Theodore said, yeah, Mrs. Klein has something called MS. That's why she's in a wheelchair. And Sean was in the kitchen, and I could tell he was sort of listening to this conversation. And it was like a door opening, because I just thought, this is the moment where I'm going to tell my kids that I have this. I have what Mrs. Klein has. And their eyes got wide. And I said, Theodore said, are you going to be in a wheelchair? And I said, I don't know. I mean, there's a possibility of that. But would that matter? I mean, Mrs. Klein is in a wheelchair, and does that stop her from doing things that she loves to do? Does that stop her from being a good teacher? And, Matthew said, no, she's the best teacher I've ever had. And Theodore said, well, if you're in a wheelchair, I could ride that wheelchair with you. And so I just thought, what a gift that I'm having this conversation with my boys, and Mrs. Klein made it okay for me to have this. And my son Theodore now has Mrs. Klein for third grade. And she's a very special person in our lives.
I always have one special teacher. I
And
think probably everybody here does. That may be yours too.
Well, she makes a point of telling her class that just because she has this and just because she's in a wheelchair doesn't mean that she can't, rise to the challenge every day.
So speaking of rising to the challenge, how did your books come about? I have Freddie here. I'm going to ask Janice to sign it later, but in case you have nieces and nephews, it's so much fun, and it's a series of 4 or 5 now?
There's 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was first, right?
Mm-hmm.
Children's
That was the
book was
one.
first, and then along came Mostly Sunny. So did you always want to be an author?
I always loved to write. And my mom tells me that too, and I remember, being in grade school and high school, and it's something that I always loved to do. And I remember my teacher saying that you do this well. Mm-hmm. But it is a bit daunting when you sit down and think, oh my gosh, I'm going to put a few sentences together. Will people read it? The children's books were a good introduction into that.
Particularly to the process.
The
right,
process, of course. Yeah, and just the editing of it. You know, a children's book, you have to basically tell a story in very few lines. And obviously the illustrations done by a tremendous illustrator, Russ Cox, you know, brings the narration to life. But Freddie was kind of a little project, a great story with that. John Kasich, who was the governor of Ohio, also worked at Fox News and also was a presidential candidate.
Which, by the way, is as close as we're going to get to politics tonight.
Okay, right? That's it. No, the only red and blue I see are on a map, and it's high and low pressure. That's the only. So he said to me one day, because he was working at Fox, and he said, Janice Dean, my girls are afraid of thunderstorms. You need to write children's books about thunderstorms or weather to help kids understand how this happens. And it was like a light bulb went off. I was like, oh, that's a great idea. But from that idea to actually writing the book took about 8 years. Because I had the idea, I went to one publisher, they liked the idea of a children's weather book, but didn't necessarily love the story. And the moral of the story is I still loved my idea, I believed in my idea, and I finally, several years later, came up with the idea of a frog that loves weather, and the frog casting came into it. And then the names came to me, Polly Woggins, Sally Croker, the lily pad. And so I found somebody that believed in me, believed in the story, and now we have 5 books, and maybe even a children's television series. We'll see.
That's very exciting.
We'll see.
And then Mostly Sunny, how did that come about?
So.
And is it different writing a children's book?
Very much so. Children's book, man, that was a piece of cake compared to writing about yourself. Mm-hmm. When I was first diagnosed with MS, all I wanted to do was read helpful stories that were an inspiration of people that were going through illness, because it was a very dark period of time, and I just wanted to hear stories of people that were doing well or that were challenged, but they were dealing with those challenges and they weren't giving up hope. And I didn't find a lot of those books. So when I was asked to write this book, I thought, I want this book to be something that I would have liked to have read when I was first diagnosed, that gave me hope. So obviously the MS diagnosis is a couple of chapters, but I also write about my life and the things that, the challenges that I went through, but the sunshine that came afterwards. Mm-hmm. So it was difficult. It didn't take me as long as I thought it was going to take. And Sean, he had to read a lot of what I was writing too.
Was he your first editor?
Yes, and actually he's a very good editor. Before he became a firefighter, he was actually a journalist. So he was my first editor, yeah. Some of the stories were tough to read, but I'm really glad I did it. The hardest part of that book was the night before it was released.
Wow, why?
Because you are putting yourself out there. Some of the stories my mom didn't really know fully, Sean didn't fully know about. I talk about Imus, I talk about Mr. Ailes, but I wanted to do justice to all of it. People are complicated. It's not black and white. And life is complicated. Mm-hmm. It's not as easy as point A to B. You have to sometimes branch off and do different things.
Were there things that you wanted in it that your editor took out?
There were, when we talked about, we had to be careful, obviously. I write a chapter about Roger Ailes in there. And to Fox's credit, when I went to them and asked them if I could write the book, I said to them, I would like to write an honest account of my dealings with him, both good and bad, and I hope that you will support me in that. And they did. They really did. They let me write pretty much everything. And just for legal reasons, there were a few things that I had to take out.
Sure.
But no, most of it's in there.
Well, let's go there, because on December 20th of this year, there's a little movie called Bombshell
Yeah, you
coming
may have
out.
heard of it.
And for those that haven't seen the trailer yet, it's the story of an amazing group of women at Fox News who take on the toxic male culture of their work environment, which eventually led to the downfall of Roger Ailes. That name should not be new to any of you, and we're in Hollywood, or pretty close to it, so you probably have seen the trailer of it. You were hired by Roger Ailes.
Mm-hmm.
You were colleagues with Gretchen Carlson. You're good friends with Megyn Kelly. Knowing that probably most of the people in here are Fox fans, can you tell us your take on the Roger Ailes story? And then can you tell us a little bit of how post-Roger Ailes Fox is operating?
Let me take a look. So I wanted to paint a fair picture of Mr. Ailes. He hired me. He saw something in me that others maybe didn't. I had uncomfortable meetings with him at the very beginning when I was interviewing with him. But I write about in the book that my whole career I've had to deal with weird, compromising situations with male bosses, not just in broadcasting. When I worked at a shoe store, I remember a boss being there that was asking some pretty weird questions and putting me into some interesting situations. I worked at a men's clothing store for a number of years where that brought interesting situations. But I was always able to walk this sort of fine line of laughing it off or making a joke or saying I have a boyfriend or...
Which is what women did.
Right.
And probably still do
And still do.
Shouldn't.
Well, but...
But you have to get along, and
You do, and I never felt threatened by Mr. Ailes. I remember thinking, this is weird, and he's asking some interesting, weird questions. But again, I was always able to laugh it off and say I have a boyfriend, and Mr. Ailes, this is not a 1-900 number. But we got past that, and he hired me. He hired me. I would say for the first year, he was very interested in helping me with my career. There were, again, moments, the spin that you hear about, that did happen. He did do that. But I also, even though that's very uncomfortable for some women, there are other women that would say, well, we're in a visual business, and you're looking at our bodies on television, and I work out every day. So I didn't find that particularly crazy. You know, he asked me to do a spin. I'm proud of the way I look. I wasn't bothered by it. Having said that, when Gretchen did file her lawsuit, I felt it was important when there was a serious lawsuit and a serious investigation. I thought it was important to go and tell my story, even though at the time we never, ever thought Mr. Ailes was going to be fired or let go. But I thought if he was doing this, if he was going past just the uncomfortable comments and the suggestions, then it was important for the women that this had happened to go into Paul Weiss, which was the investigator, and tell our stories. And there were many of us. But I also talk about in the book how he had a very good side to him. When I was diagnosed with MS, what can I do, Janice? What can I do for your family? Catherine Herridge had a young son that needed a kidney transplant, and he would get on the phone and say, where can I get a kidney? He was very loyal. I still believe he should be recognized as one of the most, powerful men in television, and he helped make presidents as well. If you look back at his career, he was a genius, helping, political candidates be great on television. But he did have a dark side to him. And, you know, I think Hollywood likes to single out Fox News and make these movies and these TV shows about us. But 48th and 6th, which is where Fox News is located, is not the only building where that is going on. And so, you know, it's easy to throw stones.
Yeah.
But it's happening in every single broadcast company.
Yeah. Were you okay talking about it?
No, it was very hard. Like, I write about it in the book the night before that I was going into the lawyers to tell them my story. And again, we never thought Mr. Ailes was going to be removed, and he was very powerful.
You thought he wasn't going to be removed because he was powerful?
Yes, and you have to remember there was no Me Too in this. There was no, this was the first. This was the earthquake, and then what we're experiencing now is the aftershocks, right? So Gretchen filed her lawsuit. And, you know, by the way, I didn't really know Gretchen's story, and we knew each other. I didn't know her story. I had told her a few things that had happened in the beginning of my career with him. So she had an idea that something had happened. And during the years, you heard stories. I knew Megan's story because she had told me. But again, back then, it was like, that's how you navigated, you know? And then you went on to have good relationships with him. It was almost like he would test you. I always thought he wanted to have an affair, and I was just able to keep saying, no, that's not happening. And I was able to still, you know, have a productive career. But that day before I went into the lawyers, thinking that this is, you know, he's going to find out, I'm probably going to be fired, or he's going to find a way, or, you know, I'll never work in this town again. I had the worst panic attack I've ever had. And I remember coming home and saying to Sean, who knew what was going on, obviously, I said, I don't know if we can do this to our family. I don't know if I can go in, and I don't know if my story is going to make a difference. And he looked at me and he said, you have to go in and do that. You have to go in and tell your story. And whatever happens, we will deal with it. We will deal with this as a family. And so I did.
Great tribute to you, Sean. I mean, really, that she had someone to give her that kind of support. Yes.
A lot of women don't, and I think that's the hardest part, right? I knew I had his support.
But I also hear that you are not allowed to ride the Long Island Railroad any longer.
So that's the funny part of the book. Like, I tell these stories also with humor. So that day before, I was on the Long Island Railroad, because I ride that home. A lot of people think that, oh, she's so fancy, she probably gets a car service. But no, I ride the Long Island Railroad home. But it can be very depressing sometimes. You know, they're old, and you know, they sometimes like break down, and I'm on it for a good 40 minutes. And I remember being on that train and going, we can't do this, I can't. I remember texting Megan Kelly, because we were talking through the whole time and saying, we can't do this to our families. Like, he's not going to be fired. Why are we doing this? And I remember her telling me, if he's not guilty, he has nothing to lose. But if he is, then we need to say something. But I do remember going home and saying to Sean, I don't think I'm going to go in there tomorrow. And he looked at me, he's like, that's the Long Island Railroad. The Long Island Railroad's very depressing. You shouldn't make any decisions while you're riding the Long Island Railroad. I know that's not a very good endorsement for public transit. And here we are.
Yes, here we are. Let's talk about some of the good people that you have worked with. I know Shep Smith just left Fox, and he is the one, I think, that nicknamed you, right? Janice Dean, the Weather Machine?
Janice Dean, the Weather Machine. When I first came to Fox, Mr. Ailes said, you and Shep Smith, magic. I know it's going to happen. And we did rehearsals before that, and I would come in back then it was Studio B. And Jane Skinner, she did Skinnerville, and she's a big part of this book too. I'm very close to Jane. But yeah, one day we were doing rehearsals, and I could tell Shep, you know, he's so bright. he was thinking, Janice Dean, Janice Dean, Janice Dean. And he was like, Janice Dean, the weather machine. And it stuck. It stuck, and now it's, part of the weather books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Neil Cavuto, I know he plays a sort of real special role, I think, in your life, in the puzzle of what makes Janice Dean up. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
So Neil also has multiple sclerosis, and when I was diagnosed and I was in a very dark place, Mr. Ailes called me up and said, you need to go talk to Neil Cavuto. And I knew that he had MS, so I remember, I didn't know Neil very well. We certainly did our part on the air together, but I hadn't spent a great deal of time with him outside of being on the air. But I remember calling him, and he was like, come right in. And I went into his office, and he turned off the television, and he brought his chair right over to mine. And I remember I just sat there and cried for probably half an hour. And he listened to me say, oh, what's going to happen? My career is over. I don't want my boyfriend to leave me. I want to have a family. This is going to ruin it. And he just said, you're going to be okay. I'm here. You work for a company that's going to support you. And if we have to build his and her wheelchair ramps, we will.
So how was that, telling Fox? That's not really the message that an employer wants to hear, that they have.
Listen, I'm a big advocate of being able to tell your employer that you have an illness, because many people told me not to. Mm-hmm. Many people said it's going to affect your career, they're not going to promote you. That's the last thing you should be doing, is going and telling them. But I had to. I told Mr. Ailes right away when I was diagnosed. And I had Neil, and Neil gave me that support. And I think because of Neil's kind of being a trailblazer and telling people he had MS and going out on the air and saying that he had MS. And not only MS, he got through cancer and open heart surgery. Mm-hmm. He's funny. He's like, I have more lives than cats. And he'll always say to me, he's like, listen, kid, the MS thing, use it to your advantage. No taking out the garbage, no vacuuming, you're tired. So he's funny. But with Fox, they were very, they were okay. They were, whatever you need, we will.
That's great to hear. I know my bosses, Ronald and Nancy Reagan, had issues throughout their life, medical issues, and they felt very strongly about sharing them with the public, including Alzheimer's, and the president.
So much awareness.
Yeah, wrote the letter and allowed us to put it out because he wanted people to know that this happens, and it happens to famous people, and it happens to presidents, and we do need awareness, and we do need society to understand that there are people who have MS and who conduct their lives pretty normally. Honestly.
Yeah.
And it's really important both, to raise money for these types of causes and to sensitize people to it. I think
Absolutely.
Really important. So I really applaud you. I know President and Mrs. Reagan would be right behind you there. They both shared, all of their illnesses throughout cancer and all of those things, because it helped people, and it did help people. I know after Alzheimer's, we got hundreds and hundreds and thousands of calls from people who said, just please tell the president thank you. We never wanted to talk about it in our family, and now he's made it okay to do that. So thank you for really bringing it to the forefront, and not just the MS, but there are some other things in this book, I think, that people wouldn't talk about normally. And you have, and I'm sure it was hard on your family a little bit, or a lot maybe, to see it in writing, some things that have happened to you over the years. And we won't go into all of them because I want you to get the book. But my point is, I really appreciate your willingness to be honest and be blunt about it, and go on and live your life. We can see you. You know, you're really a great role model for me, I think, and for a lot of people who are going to read this book on so many levels. So.
That's kind. Well, I mean, I feel lucky that I have this life. I feel lucky that I have a platform that I can, I mean, I feel it. I meet people on a very regular basis because I go outside and I do the weather, and I meet the people that are there. And there are, just this past week, I had this one fella with his wife, and I could tell in his face, you know, there was something going on. And I like to give hugs. I always, you know, can I give you a hug? And I gave him a hug, and he clearly had tears in his eyes. And I said, are you doing okay? And he's like, I'm going through something, but I really wanted to meet you because I see you on TV, and it just brings me joy and hope. And I said to my wife, we're in New York City, I want to go meet Janice Dean. And even though he didn't tell me what he was going through, I could tell, and I felt like, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to do the weather, but I feel that. I feel that if I can give somebody that extra push that she's doing this, I can do this. Yeah. And I also feel the same way about, you know, I talk about getting older and being on television. I'm going to be 50 next year, and I can't wait for 50. I can't. But that's, for a lot of women, it's a ceiling. You shouldn't be on TV after that, right? So I talk about aging in television and the pressure that a lot of women are under. And I went through a little cosmetics procedure that set me back a little bit, and I talk about that. Because if we can't be honest, because TV is just this big facade, right? It's fancy lights, fancy hair, good makeup, but we're all human beings, and I feel like maybe I'm that TV person that has to say, well, I have MS, and I'm not a size 4, and I did this thing to make myself look younger, and that didn't work out so well. So I'm happy to, you know, break that barrier, because I actually am proud that I don't maybe look like the rest of them on television, and I have an illness, but man, what a great life I have.
But I think there's the difference. You're happy.
I am very happy.
Not so sure a lot of them are, to be honest with you.
You know what you said earlier, it's the challenges that you go through that shape the person that you are today. Had I not gone through an illness, I don't know if I would be as happy as I am today. I don't think I would be.
We are going to take some audience questions in just a minute, but before we do, I want to talk weather. Got Janice Dean sitting next to me.
Those Santa Ana winds, man.
Well, I was just going to say,
that's no joke.
They've been not good to us today. We're missing a lot of people. We had a lot of staff members actually have to leave quite early today. They're in an evacuation zone, so we feel it. We understand that weather is important. You know, and our weather people and you knew this a week ago. So my question is, what has changed? I mean, when I was growing up, you know, we would listen to the weatherman and laugh and laugh and laugh because the weatherman never got it right. There weren't many weather women at the time either. And now you can pinpoint the weather to the hour. And one more thing I want to bring up, because when she arrived and got out of the car tonight, she gave me a hug, first of all, thank you. But also I looked at her and, oh my gosh, that's my favorite color in the world. I love Kelly green. I'm part Irish, so I try to do that on St. Patrick's Day and other times during the year. But it hit me that she had it on, and that's not a dress she can wear every day to do the weather.
With the green screen. Do you guys know about the green screen? Right? So every time I'm not doing weather, I'm wearing green. I love going out and talking to kids about the weather, and talking about the green screen is so much fun. But yeah, and a few years back with my friend Megan Kelly, it was St. Patrick's Day, and I said, let's do something on television. Let's do the magic of the green screen. It's on YouTube. You can go look it up. Where I wore a green jacket, and then I was just a floating head and hands.
In fact, in our museum here, if you all have
I saw the green screen.
we have a green screen because we had so many people who had never really understood what a green screen was, or a teleprompter. We have a teleprompter
Right.
in one of our galleries too. So what seems like, ancient technology now, we still have a lot of people in my age range, sadly, who have never experienced a green screen or a teleprompter.
Not your age, sadly. Embrace it, sister. No way. So yes, the green screen, the kids love it. And I will say that doing the weather, people don't realize that weather people don't use a teleprompter. It's all ad lib. So when I'm out on the plaza, some people will look at me and go, where are you reading that? I'm like, I'm not reading that. That's just like, so if we make a mistake, it's our fault. We can't blame a writer or a producer.
So you get a little 10-minute briefing before you go on?
It depends. I've been doing it so long now that I can sort of, I know. Well, and the other thing is, I do national weather, so it's very broad stroke of what's going on. The big weather story, obviously the Santa Ana winds are a big weather story, so I'll touch upon that. If there's a hurricane, obviously we had tornadoes in Dallas just a few days ago. So I will focus in on the big weather story. But I have to say, it's the local forecasters that, they work so hard. And they really are doing it to protect their communities. They really are unsung heroes sometimes. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about the tornado in Dallas. There was a television station in Dallas because the football game was going on, and they didn't broadcast the warnings.
Oh my gosh.
Because they were afraid.
I thought they had to.
Well, this particular one did not. It waited 6 minutes. 6 minutes to come on with the, and that's because the people who are watching football are so diehard that they will scream and write emails and be like, don't care that there's a tornado on top of me. I need to see this football game. That was very controversial. And for me, it's like, you gotta break in and tell people that there's a warning or a storm or a tornado coming towards you. So they're the ones that really work really hard and take a beating too if they get this wrong. And listen, the forecasting has gotten better. We're pretty good at 5 days. Not 100%, but we're pretty good.
And what accounts for that? Without
the technology.
Talk. Okay.
The technology, the computer modeling. We rely on several computer models that we run through a big computer. And
that works with the satellites?
Yes, the satellite, the radar, all of the conditions, the environmental conditions that are coming into play.
Because they literally can pinpoint. I mean, last night they were like, at 1:45 the wind will start, and by 2:15, how do you know that?
Well, still not an exact science. We have a pretty good idea, but there's still some room for bust. You know what I mean? Snow is one of the hardest things to predict because there's a lot of things that come into play. Are you near an ocean? Where's that one band of snow that's going to come in that just continues to pound one area while the other region north of you is not getting any snow? So that's still very hard to predict. I'm sorry, the Farmer's Almanac is not that accurate.
I come from a farm family.
Listen, some people really rely on that thing, but if you look back historically, it's worse than a coin toss sometimes,
Wait,
So,
my family still relies on the Farmer's Almanac. My mother insists on buying every one of us for our stockings every year at Christmas a Farmer's Almanac.
listen, I'm all for be prepared for whatever happens. And I find that with the Farmer's Almanac, it's always cold, snow, coming, So I'm just listen, as long as you're prepared.
Once in a while, yeah.
Yeah. Listen, we're really getting good at hurricane forecasting, especially that cone 5 days out is getting really good at accurately predicting, pretty narrowly where that storm is going to come on shore. Tornadoes are still really tough to exactly pinpoint where a tornado is going to happen, but we can always give you a pretty good guidance of where we think there is the potential for a severe weather outbreak.
Earthquakes, of course, are what concern us out here. And
Yeah, and those are,
I suppose someday they might get.
they can tell with the swarms that are going on underneath, but yeah.
Don't get much notice, Bo.
No, you don't.
Okay, we have time for a couple questions. I'm sorry I took up so much time. Anybody out there?
I'm just so grateful you guys came. Thank you for coming. It's
Wait for the microphone if you don't mind.
I'm wondering, this is a little off subject, but any information, about Shepard Smith's situation that you could possibly?
He's going to be okay. I know that he probably can't work just because of contractual obligations.
Anybody going to follow him up? Have you guys got a bench that's going to take over and do well?
I think for now it's going to be a news hour. There's no doubt that the 3 p.m. is a news hour, so we're rotating. We've got Brett Baer, we've got Martha McCallum, we've got Shannon Bream, John Scott. So they're going to do a rotating schedule for that 3 p.m. Listen, Shepard was there from the very beginning, and from what I hear, this was a very tough decision for him. I don't know all of the things that went into his decision, but I know that he's going to be okay. He'll probably turn up somewhere. He loves to do news. But I'm going to miss Shepard. I loved him, and I know a lot of people will say things, well, maybe it was political and he didn't like what was going on in politics, but listen, I can't speak for Shepard Smith. No one can speak for him. And you have to know what's right for you and your family and when the time is. I have a feeling we'll see him again, and he's a good man, and
Stay tuned.
he'll be fine. But I don't know about any how things happen or how it went down.
I wonder, I was on Mount Whitney 2 weeks ago and was making a decision on whether we were going to summit or not. And it was we had about a window there. And we made a decision. We looked at this weather bank that was coming in with a 45-mile-an-hour wind in our face coming from that front to us. Mm-hmm. But it was an interesting. As we looked at it, all of a sudden I could see that it was changing, and so we made a decision. We're going to go for this thing, and it was a lot of smarter people than us were bailing. Okay, mm-hmm. But it was an interesting thing, and so we did it, and we were successful, and what I saw was actually right. And then I actually looked at the weather report after. The next day, and I looked at it, and it was giving that the winds would be from south to southwest, and then in the afternoon it would be changing. And so it was interesting to actually see that. And I went, that's what was going on. I could see that, even though you couldn't feel it, but I could see it happening.
It is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, we're never going to it's never going to be perfect,
Mother Nature.
Right, but we're getting there. It is pretty amazing when you do forecast something and it does happen. But then it's not so amazing when you forecast something and then it doesn't.
It doesn't happen. Was there a question? Yes. Will you wait for the microphone, though, if you don't mind?
Thank you. My name is Dennis Weber, and when I was a little boy, I lived right behind the Long Island Railroad and rode it many times.
So did you have to make any life-changing decisions on the Long Island Railroad?
I was too young, but I never went back. But I want to say something to you that I've been to many of these things and have many books signed by you, everybody, and I have never cried until I was here today with you.
Aww.
And I want to tell you that I work in a bank locally, and there's a lady that has MS. And she is the happiest son of a gun. Aww. We laugh and joke, and she keeps me up all day. She is so fun. So I want to, on her behalf, I'm saying, God bless you, and glad I met you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Well, I will tell you, I'll give you a scoop. You're getting a real scoop. So I am writing another book.
Oh.
Yes, we just decided. And it's going to
Wait a
be...
minute, we?
No, just me. Well, yes, no, we. So I'm writing a book not about me, but about people that I've met and people that I've heard about and I'm going to learn about. And I'm going to feature them in a new book, and we're going to call it Make Your Own Sunshine. And it's, if you guys listen to Sirius Radio, I do a feature every day called The Dean's List. And it's a good news story. It's a minute long, and I focus on, just everyday people doing great things. And from that, I thought, that sounds like a book. Like, I want to feature just everyday people where you hear about them doing something sometimes as simple as there's a story about a student that comes in, and obviously a little bit older, trying to get their education or go on a different path, a different career, so they're going back to school. So this fella that was taking care of his baby, he had an exam coming up, and he knew he had to go to class, but he couldn't find a babysitter. So he brings the baby in with him, and the professor, while he's taking notes, the professor is holding the baby for him. And it's just a simple story, right, of somebody that can't find a babysitter, but he really wants to pass his exam, and he brings the baby in, and he has help from his professor and the other students to take his notes down. And I think that is such a beautiful story that more people need to know about, because I think now more than ever, we need to hear these stories, because I believe there is way more good in this world than not good. And just meeting people that I meet every single day, I just know, like, the human spirit is there, and we're all human beings, and we all want to help one another. So I'm starting this book, and hopefully it'll be done maybe next year, and I hope that maybe I can come back to talk about that.
Oh, we'd love to have you, yes.
So it won't be about me, but it'll be about stories that touch my heart, and just, of everyday people doing amazing things for others.
Well, I commend you. I think that's, after you do one book, I've not written my own, but many people ask me if I will someday, and to be honest with you, I don't think I will, because I've worked with so many people, including the president, on a number of book projects, and when we're finally done, I was like, oh, that was the greatest feeling in the world, and I'm just not so sure I can go through it.
Well, we all have a story.
Oh my
we all
gosh.
have a story to tell, right?
That's right.
I feel like everyone could write a book about their lives.
Well, and I think your focus on people, I mean, that's what attracts me, to be honest with you. It's what I loved about your book. Yes, it's about you, but honestly, it's about the people that surround you and the people that you've met and the people that have impacted you in your life. And I know we have another question down here, but I have one quick one that I want to ask. We all have somebody that we want to meet, politician, maybe not, member of the royal family.
I would have loved to have met Ronald Reagan. I would have loved it.
And he would have loved to have met you, to be honest. Some people want to meet movie stars. Some people want to meet musicians. They're fans of, like, Aerosmith or Lynyrd Skynyrd.
Got to meet them.
She knows where I'm headed here. That I thought was a very fun story. Could you tell us a little bit about your Aerosmith?
The Steven Tyler
And then
story.
and then maybe we can get some hints from you how to stalk these people.
You have to be careful, right? Because nowadays, with all that's going on, you gotta be. I'm surprised that there aren't more Me Too stories in the rock world.
Yeah.
But, well, so Steven Tyler, I worked at a classic rock station when I first starting out, and so I got to meet all these really cool, like, rock stars. And Aerosmith was playing my hometown of Ottawa, and I was doing the afternoon when they were playing. So they were playing an outdoor venue, and I was on scene. And I had heard that the band was going to come back and meet some of the, the DJs and the reporters. So of course I wanted to go back. So I went back, and there was many people in the room, and we were all sort of given numbers so that when the band came in, we could take a picture with, the band, and we all had our numbers and our groups. And so we're all waiting, and the band walks in, and Steven Tyler walks in, and my gosh, he just was so charismatic, and we were all like, oh, there he is. And he kind of scanned the room. And I just remember he was scanning the room, and he looked right at me, like right at me. It's like, is he looking at me? And then, you know, people are like, Steven, Steven. And he makes a beeline. He comes right up to me, and he grabs my hand. He says, what's your name? And I was like, well, I'm Janice Dean. And he was like, I'm Steven Tyler. And I said, I know that. He says, what are you doing here? I said, oh, well, I'm a DJ at the radio station, and I got to I got to interview the other guys in the band, but you weren't there. He says, well, we could make that happen. I said, oh, okay. And we just started, I mean, I don't even remember the whole conversation. I just know that he was talking to me, and everybody was like, why is he talking to her? And then they basically whisked him away and said, it's time to get pictures. And so he stood there with the band, and I think I was number 5. I had number 5, so I was the 5th group to go up there. And the group number 1 was called. So they were all standing with the band, and Steven Tyler looks up and goes, where's Janice Dean? He's like, get over here. And so in every single picture, I'm like standing next to Steven Tyler. I'm just like, what's happening here? I was like 21 or 22. And it's funny because, we get the pictures taken, and we were told we could not get single pictures with any members of the band. But because I was standing there the whole time, I said to him, I was like, can I get a picture, just you and me? He's like, yeah. And the photographer comes over, and we get this picture together, which I have. And then he said, are you going to come to the show tonight? And I said, oh, I'm not sure. He said, of course you're coming to the show. Talk to this person, and you'll come backstage. Well, I never went. I was too afraid. I was too afraid. And the trajectory of my life would have probably gone completely different had I gone to the show. But I just remember I got the picture back in the mail, and he had never signed it. And I was sort of heartbroken because I was like, oh, we had just such a great moment. And so a few years ago on Fox and Friends, they were playing Aerosmith, and I was doing the weather. And I said, oh, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to tell this great story in about 20 seconds of how I met Aerosmith 20 years ago. And I get a picture with Steven Tyler, and I would love for him to sign it one day. So, social media, of course, right? Gotta love it and hate it. I get this direct message from somebody that knows somebody who knows Steven Tyler. I saw you on TV. You have a picture. I know a person that can get it to him. So I'm like, of course I'm going to try to do this. So I send this picture in the mail, and a few weeks later, I get a signature. I think it said, "Dear Janice, here's a full frontal Steven Tyler." Because if you see the picture, we're like, anyway.
The picture's in the book, so.
The picture's in the book.
All right, we do have one more question that I wanted to give her the opportunity, and then I think probably we're even overtime, so.
Hello, Janice. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you for coming.
I wanted to tell you that Shannon Breen was here a few months ago.
One of my besties.
And she was just so beautiful, and so were her shoes. Everybody who's...
She has fantastic
Everybody
shoes.
has great shoes there. And she was asked if she was going to be alone on a desert island, who would she want to take with her? And she said you. Because you were so positive and so cheerful, and that you would, the reason that she would want to be with you on a deserted island. Now, my question is, out of the Fox family, besides Sean over here, who else would you want to be on the island with from Fox? And my last question, tell us about witty Brian Kilmeade.
Oh, I love Brian Kilmeade. So the desert island thing, I would have to say Shannon Bream. I mean, but I will tell you this. So I've been at Fox I'm going into my 17th year there. And people always ask me, are the people that we see on TV like as nice as they seem on television? And I tell you, I would not be there as long as I've been there if I didn't really love these people. They are my family, and Sean can attest to this. I mean, granted, I get up at an ungodly hour, But the fact that I get to spend time with these amazing people, like Steve, Ainsley, Brian, Jillian, there's nobody that I don't really truly love there. I mean, that we just all love each other. So they are my family. And there are many people I would gladly spend time with on a desert island. But Shannon and I have a special bond. We're very much kind of the same type of people. Like, we always try to find silver linings. We have met and married amazing, wonderful, supportive men. Like, Sheldon is her rock, and Sean's my rock. And she also realizes that we are very blessed to have this platform that we have, but we also realize the secret to life is that if it all went away tomorrow and the TV bright lights were turned off, we would be okay. You know, we would walk out with our head held high and say, that's okay, next, you know? But also knowing that we have this wonderful, blessed life, and we have so much fun together. We really do. She's in DC. I don't see her as much as I would like to. And Kilmeade, he's been out here, hasn't he?
Yes.
And he has a new book coming out very soon. And Brett Baer, he's coming out when?
He's coming on the 29th. Yeah, next
He's
week.
lovely. I adore him. I love his whole family. He's so charming, and when he comes, you could spend hours listening to him. Him and Brian are similar in that they love history. They love writing books about history and are very passionate about people reading and learning and remembering history because it's really our guide. And my husband actually majored in history in school. So, you know, history is important. You know, it helps us guide us today. But he's so funny. He has us in stitches, Brian Kilmeade. And Steve's kind of like the dad, right? He's very protective of all of us. But Sean just got promoted recently this past year. He's a chief now with the fire department. And
Yes.
the reason I'm telling this story is because we had a party. And we invited people, obviously. And I invited Steve, Ainsley, and Brian. Brian couldn't make it. He would, because he lives on Long Island. He also takes the Long Island Railroad. But Steve and Ainsley came to the celebration. And, you know, even Sean made the comment, like, this is really special for these people to come and be a part of our family and take time out of their lives and their families to come see us. So Steve is he's a family guy, and he will encourage anyone and everyone to put your family first, always. And so, yeah, they're all great. If any Fox people come out, come to see them because they all are really, truly amazing people.
Well, we're blessed that we do have quite a few Fox people.
Yeah.
So we are 15 minutes over my allotted time. I have people whose heads are spinning in the back of the room that you cannot see, which means that we are going to have to say goodbye to Janice on the stage, but she has agreed to sign books in the bookstore. So if you give us a few minutes, we will get rid of our microphones and we will meet you up there. If you don't have a book already, you can get one up there. You can get more. They're the perfect size for Christmas stockings, I've discovered. So if you have a family and friends that would enjoy it, I would highly recommend it. It's a really easy book to read. It was lovely. I mean, I have to say, it gave me a lot of hope for a lot of different reasons. And so I thank you, Janice, for coming. You did consider this your invitation to come back on your next book.
I would love to.
We will try to do it on a non-red flag day, please. We will leave that up to you to make sure that happens. And hopefully we'll see you all next week at Brett Baer.
And
right?
thank you for coming. I mean, I know that it was hard. It's a Thursday and you all have families and it means so much to me. And actually Shannon was the one who said, you will love the Reagan Library and you will love the people that you're going to meet. So I thank you for coming. And I consider all of you like my family too. So Just know that when you watch me on television, I feel the love coming through the TV screen.
Good. Okay.
That was